Well, hello there and happy Saturday. I thought I would jump on to Facebook Live because I wanted to talk to you about 3 ways to help anxious kids deal with emotions. A lot of us are dealing with anxious kids, and one of the biggest struggles is how to deal with their emotions. So I want to talk about that really briefly. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Natasha Daniels, and I'm a child therapist who specializes in anxiety and OCD. So I want to talk to you about anxiety and about how they can deal with emotions. So if you know somebody else who is struggling with their kids and they're anxious and they don't know how to deal with their emotions, tag them before I get started because I don't want them to miss what I'm going to say. Or you can share my Facebook Live before I get going so that other people who are raising anxious kids can join too. I am also going to talk about the Super Sensory Bundle that's been going on, and it ends in 2 days. So if you don't know about it, I will talk about it. But I'm going to tell you some tips about how to help your kids with their emotions. And I'm also going to weave in some of the resources that are in the bundle so that you can see what you can use with your kids as a supplement. So if you know somebody who's like, I have an anxious kid and I don't know how to deal with it, go ahead and tag them because we're about to begin. So the first thing I think that's really important, and this is going to seem really obvious, and actually a lot of what I'm going to say is going to seem obvious, but we really don't do it as parents. So when you have an anxious kid, you don't want to assume that one, they know how to express their emotions, because a lot of kids don't come out of the womb knowing how to talk about their emotions. And so we have to teach them, and that might seem really weird or counterintuitive, but a lot of kids just don't have an emotional vocabulary. So teach your kids how to express their emotions, and then you want to teach your kids how to play detective and figure out what is making them anxious. What are their triggers? What makes them angry? What makes them upset? That seems simple, but you can't progress until your kids know that. And a lot of kids that come to me as a therapist don't know that. And that's the first place we have to start. So when they're really little, like toddlers, then you start giving them some language. You're frustrated. Give them big words. You're frustrated. Oh, you're angry. You're worried. I can't tell you how many kids come into my practice and they don't know what the word anxious means. There's lots of words that can be used around worry. That makes you anxious. That makes you worry. So the first thing is build the emotional understanding. In the bundle, there are some things that can help with that. So the bundle is, I don't know if you know about it. I actually did leave a link in the title, and so you can access it and see what I'm talking about. But 38 of us, well actually it was 39 including me, got together and we are experts in different areas. And so I am a specialist in anxiety and OCD, and there's other people in there who are really seasoned parents who are raising kids with sensory processing issues. There are occupational therapists in there. There are educators in there. Everybody has their amazing specialty. And we all said, these are our best resources. And so I know anxiety, and so I put my ebook in there. And it is like, it's got all my articles on anxiety. And other people put their resources in there. And then with a bundle, you bundle it together and you give it to somebody like practically for free. So it's over $400 worth of value for $29.99, which is ridiculous. But so the stuff I'm going to talk about, all this stuff is included in the bundle. So when you're teaching your kids about emotions, you're going to want to start labeling things, and when they're little, it's going to be very simplistic, and when they get older, you don't want to just assume that they know that, and so you're going to want to build some of their skills. In the bundle, you get Teaching Emotions Toolkit. I don't know if you can see this. I love this one because this is valued, I think, at like $14 or $15.99, and the bundle is only $29.99. So this in and of itself is worth it because you get 49 different tools in the bundle, which whether they're like books or games or different resources, they're kind of like unique different things. And so with this, you get to download it, and I think it's really cool because it's got emotion cards, which you can print out. It's got a feelings poster. It's got underlying emotions video? What color are your feelings? So it's like this in and of itself is a bundle on how to teach your kids emotions. So that's pretty awesome. You also want to help your kids understand what is the trigger to my anxiety. And so a lot of times we don't dig deep enough. And so I often tell parents, ask your kids, what is the worst about blah, blah, blah? So if your kids are not going to school, what's the worst part about going to school? If your kids are afraid to go to sleep, what's the worst part about going to bed at night? We make a lot of assumptions. We assume, well, of course they're afraid to go to bed because who's not afraid to go to sleep? Or, well, they don't want to go to school because, school's boring. But sometimes those assumptions are wrong. And when they're anxious kids, those assumptions are wrong a lot of the time. So we want to dig deep and figure out for our children, what is causing that anxiety? And so you want to help them make that connection. Not only I can talk about my anxiety and I can articulate it, so I have all the right words. This makes me frustrated. This makes me nervous. But then I can also say, these type of things make me nervous. I'm anxious because I don't like crowds. And so I don't want to go to that party because there's going to be a lot of people there. Or I don't want to go to bed at night because I'm worried about being away from you. That's a common one, by the way. And a lot of times we just assume it's because they don't want to go to sleep or they're afraid of the dark. But sometimes it's actually because they're afraid of separating from you. Or it's because they have a lot of intrusive thoughts at night and they are completely different than what we're expecting. So you want to sit with your kids, and before you go into fix-it mode, which I think we all go into a lot of the time, take a pause and figure out what was the core fear. Don't assume, because I think a lot of times our assumptions are wrong. There is another tool in the toolkit in the Super Bundles packet that does do that. And I want to mention, because I totally forgot, even though I have notes in front of me, at the very end of this Facebook Live, I am going to give you a special offer. I'm giving away something of mine completely free, which is valued at $20 for anyone who buys the bundle through this link through my Facebook Live, because you should get a bonus, because why not? So I left a link and I'll leave a link in the comments too, so that you can see that. Hi, Lisa. So I'll tell you what that is at the very end, because between what I'm going to give you, which is $20 for free, and my ebook, which is $8, that's $28 of just my stuff, and the bundle's $29.99. So for like another $1, you're going to get 49 other resources besides mine, which I think that's amazing. But I wanted to show you this. This is my Calming Strategies worksheet. So this is pretty cool too. And these are all in the bundle. And this is a workbook for your kids. And I like this because this is the stuff I do actually in therapy. She has like a journal, and I can't share my screen, so I'll just share it like this. So she goes through, and each day you list out your child's possible triggers, the time and location, and some notes. I tell parents to do this. I say, hey, start to track their behavior. So if you could do this with your kids, that's awesome, because you're going to start to see patterns. Also, then you do your weekly tracking. If you don't know what's going on with your kids, you can't teach them to fix it. And sometimes the emotions are going to be really ugly. And so the emotions that you're dealing with are anger and meltdowns and nasty oppositional behavior, when really underneath all that is anxiety. So we want to put a pause on the discipline and the frustration, and we want to dig deep and we want to figure out what's going on with our kids. But more importantly, we want to figure out what's going on with our kids so our kids know what's going on with them. So this planner, super helpful. I'm going to use these in my practice because, why not? A little organization is great. Also, once you know what's going on, and we're going to get to this in the second point, is calming strategies. So once you know what's happening, it's good to figure out how to fix it. So we'll talk about that. So that is actually my second point of my 3 points, is once you know what's triggering your child, and you know what is your child is able to articulate and express what is upsetting them. So all that's done. So let's just do an example. Let's say your child is like, I'm afraid to go to bed. And I'm afraid to go to bed because I'm scared I feel like I'm not safe unless I'm right next to you. That's a common one, right? Who doesn't experience that sometimes? So when you know what your child's upset with and you know what triggers them and they're able to say, Mom, I'm scared, I don't want to go to bed at night. What are you going to do with that? So maybe a half hour before bedtime, your child starts to act up and it looks like hyperactivity, or it looks like oppositional behavior. They start running around and they start not listening to you. That could be super annoying and you might think it's pure behavior. But if you've done your homework and you've done the digging, you can recognize, you can pause as a parent and you can say, one of my child's triggers is bedtime, and bedtime is happening in 30 minutes. So could this behavior be an indication that maybe my kid's anxious and not being difficult? Because if they're being anxious and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to just discipline them, good luck with that. It's not going to work because they're going to fight back, because fear will always override discipline. So you want to be able to be a little bit counterintuitive in your parenting and help them develop coping mechanisms before this happens. Because if you do it in the moment, good luck with that. So develop your kid's toolkit. So what do they do when they're anxious? So let's say your kid's running around. We're going to use this as an example. And you're like, hey, Johnny, we'll call him Johnny. I know bedtime's coming soon, and I know that's making you really anxious. So I think it's important that we do something to make you feel better. What can you do to make yourself feel better? And I think it's important to put it on them. I always tell parents, listen, you're not in the driver's seat. I know that could be scary. This is your kid's deal. This isn't your deal. So if you're doing more of the coping mechanisms than they are, or you're like kind of forcing those coping mechanisms, it's not going to work. You want it to be authentic, you want it to be organic, and you want it to be something that they come up with. So with my kids, I always say, it looks like you're feeling anxious. What do you want to do about it? And I've already developed all their coping mechanisms. So if you need help with that, there are things in the bundle that will help with that. Actually, there was like a crazy amount, because I went through the bundle myself and I'm like printing it all out and I'm running out of ink because I'm like, oh, this is so good. This is so good for my practice. But I want to show you, I only pulled out a few because I know you don't want to hear me talking all day. This one is super cool. So these are great coping mechanisms for younger kids. And I like the graphics, so you can print these out and cut them up. And it's ways I calm down. And they seem obvious sometimes to us, but they're not to our kids. So you can cut out, there's a whole bunch of these. And then, let me get through them all because there's a lot of them. And then they do a little strategy journal. We want to empower our kids to do this themselves. We don't want to do this stuff for them, because if we do it for them, it's not going to get hardwired in their brain. They're just going to look to you. So this one, they draw a little picture of themselves. And then I like this because they pick their coping strategy. And when I worked in a treatment center, total side note, when I worked in a treatment center, we would do this stuff with the kids and we would like pin it to the wall. So these are really good clinical approaches, just in a kid-friendly way. So they write their coping strategy and they say, how does this strategy help me? And it's really weird, but when kids write their own stuff, they own it. And so when you have kids write this stuff down, I know this sounds kind of weird, but there's more of an ownership. And so you put it on their wall or somewhere, that they're okay with, and you say, just go to your wall and pick one of your strategies. And because they've already said, Mom, this is a strategy that works, they're much more likely to use it over time. And it does take some practice, so you have to stick with it. And then in this same worksheet, she gives some ideas. And so she has worksheets that are specific to the strategy. So I love that. I think that's really helpful. There are a zillion other handouts, printables, and things like that in the bundle that are very similar that help you, one, get your kid to identify their emotions, label it, and a lot of strategies on how to self-regulate and how to use their coping mechanisms. So I love that. I have one more that I think is awesome. I love these sensory diet cards. So whether your child has sensory issues or not, sensory approaches are incredibly helpful. I have an 8-year-old who, when he's anxious, he becomes very hyperactive. And somebody who doesn't know what's going on with him would say, whoa, he's bouncing off the walls. And come bedtime, he is bouncing off the walls. But when I do some sensory things, he calms down. So sometimes at night I'll say, go jump on your little mini trampoline and come back down. Or, because we've built up his skills, he will start running back and forth. And we have kind of like a long hall. And I know when he's doing that, he's trying to self-regulate because he's getting some sensory input. So he'll jump up and down, or he'll run back and forth, or I'll burrito him. I make that a verb. I'll just roll him up and I'll burrito him. Or I have this huge bean bag and I'll squish him. That sounds abusive. But because I'm giving him some deep impact to help calm his nervous system, which is actually a really good thing. So these sensory diet cards are very cool because you can cut them out and they're ideas. Because a lot of times I'm kind of like, I know what he needs, but I have no idea how to give it to him. I'm not creative in the moment sometimes. So this is just an example, but there's tons of these cards you can print out, and you can tell your kid, go into your sensory jar and pick out an activity and go do it. I love that. So those are really, really helpful. So the last point that I want to talk about before I get off and let you go on with your Saturday is parenting. How do you discipline? Because this is actually really important. How you discipline teaches your kids how to self-regulate. Because if we squash them and we just say, stop crying or you're going to get time out, where is the learning in the self-regulation? But if I teach my child to learn how to self-regulate, or if they're acting out because they're anxious and I discipline it in a very typical parenting sort of way, they're going to squash their anxiety, but they're going to feel it internally. And I don't want my kid to feel it internally. And sometimes they're going to seem like they're being super difficult and behaviorally obnoxious, right? Do you ever get that at your house? But you, as a parent, look at that and you're like, he's acting like that because he's nervous. Yeah, it looks totally obnoxious, but he's nervous and that's how he's dealing with it. So the way that you handle it is very important. There's a couple of things that I think are key. One, sometimes I talk to the anxiety and not the behavior. And so if my kid's out of control and maybe they throw something, or I don't know, I'm just trying to think of an example, and I know they're anxious because something big is happening, I won't address the behavior. I'm going to address the anxiety. And so I will say, I know you're anxious. I know you're worried about going to bed. I don't know. Let's see if I can use a better example. Let's say they have a test and they're acting up or something a little bit more concrete. I would say, I know you're anxious because you have to go and take a test today, and you don't want to go to school because you don't want to take the test. And so I'm not talking to the behavior. I'm not like, get down, get your shoes on, we're going to school. I'm talking about the behavior. That is teaching emotional intelligence. We want to teach our kids emotional intelligence because it's not about getting them to behave. It's about teaching them the body-mind connection. Okay, well, yeah, she's right. I am feeling worried about that. I am acting like a little crazy, and I am really worried about that test. Now, what I'm doing is I'm connecting the dots, and that's really, really helpful. So we want to take a pause in the typical discipline when our kids are acting out because of anxiety, because they're not going to learn otherwise. Guess what? There's some help in the bundle. There are some things that I pulled out that I thought were kind of awesome. I really like this ebook, Taming the Tantrum, Simple and Positive Ways to Address Challenging Behavior. She has awesome advice, and you get the entire book in the bundle. That's worth it in and of itself as well, because there are gems in here. Another thing, I kind of like this one too. You get this handout, Tantrums versus Sensory Meltdown. This is really cool because, I gotta show you this. So you get these little explanations of the difference between a tantrum and a sensory meltdown. And I had somebody, I don't know if it was in my private Facebook group or somebody emailed me, and they said, I'm gonna cut these out and I'm gonna hand them to people in public when my kid is having a meltdown. I thought that actually was brilliant, because how many of you have been in public and your anxious, sensory overloaded kid is like a puddle and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, you're already having a hard time, and then you get that look, she doesn't know how to control her kids. And you're like, seriously, lady? You could just hand her this little note. I'm not that confrontational, so I don't think I'd be able to do that. But that would be a great tool because I'm sure many of you are braver than me. The last thing that I thought would be really helpful with my tip number 3 is this discipline tips for special needs kids, because this speaks to a lot of what I'm talking about. It talks about proper ways to discipline, effective discipline, and to find out the problems behind the discipline. So there's some really good things in here too. So I want to tell you something before you go. If you get the bundle, which is like, that is just like the tip of the iceberg. So that's just a few resources. There's 49 resources in there. But I want to give you something. So if you get the bundle, click on the link below and you email me. I'm going to give you free access to my online class, A Child Therapist's Secrets to Get Your Kids to Listen. And in that class, it's an online class that you can take. And so you just email me the receipt of your bundle, and then I just enroll you, and you can go on and take it whenever you want. My email, don't spread it out. Don't email me for advice because I get overloaded, but it's anxioustoddlers@yahoo.com. If you don't catch it, people will send me a comment in my group, and I will give it to you. But email me your receipt, and you will get access to my online class, A Child Therapist's Secrets. So in my online class, it is video lessons where I talk to you, and I go over, 1, how to deal with it when your partner and you are not on the same page. And I bet that happens a lot to you guys, because when you have an anxious kid, and I know I experience this too at my own house, sometimes one of you gets anxiety and the other one doesn't. And so you might say, oh, she's acting out because she's so anxious. And maybe your partner is like, you just coddle her. Or, you just need to be firmer. Or maybe you have an idea of what you want to discipline and your partner is totally against it and maybe undermines you. So I have an entire video lesson on how to get you and your partner on the same page. And I have an entire video lesson on my weird and wacky ideas on how to parent. And so I have some really weird things that I did and do as a parent. And it gets kids to listen, but in a fun sort of way. So I took an entire video lesson and I tell you all my weird, wacky secrets. And I also talk to you about just how to get your kids to listen in general when you give them a direction and they just are like, whatever. So that's a $20 online class. You're getting it for free if you email me at anxioustoddlers@yahoo.com with your receipt from the bundle. And you can access the bundle in the link below, and I'll put it in the comments if you miss it. I'll also, when I get off here, I will put a link to my class on there so that you can look at it and see what you'll be getting. So for my resources, you're going to get a $20 class, and my ebook, How to Parent an Anxious Child, is in the bundle. That ebook, I took all my articles that I've written for over 2 years on my site, anxioustoddlers.com, and I write articles about anxiety for kids between the ages of like 2 and 22. So it's for everybody. It's called Anxious Toddlers, but that's a long story. It's for everybody. So on my site, anxioustoddlers.com, for 2 years, I wasn't doing podcasts or YouTube videos. I was purely just doing articles. I was writing 2 articles, sometimes 3 articles a week. So I have hundreds of articles. Those are my best articles, and I put them in an ebook because a lot of people don't want to be sitting there going through my website trying to find articles. They just would rather just read it in one go. So I made the ebook. It's like over, 270 pages. So that is an $8 value. So for the $20 and the $8, that's a $28 value just for my resources. And those are extras because you're going to get 48 other resources from other experts on self-regulation and sensory stuff. So crazy good deal. Because it's crazy and it's good, it's going to be going away. It only happens for a few days, Monday, the last day, and honestly, none of us can put our resources out like that forever. So I hope you found this Facebook Live helpful. I'm hoping to do more of these as I'm getting braver and I'm willing to get out of my comfort zone to teach you. So I'm thinking I'm going to pop on once in a while from now on. If that's good, you can give me a thumbs up and I will do more of them. If you have other topics, you can leave them in the comments and I will pick your topics and I will jump on once in a while and do other Facebook Lives on different topics that are helpful for you. So I hope to see you some other time. And don't forget to share this if you have anyone that you're thinking of and you're like, gosh, she needs to hear this or he needs to hear this. Hit share, send it to people that can benefit, or tag them below. I'll talk to you later.